Here with us now.
Just go put your hands on a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and then, my friend, I think you'll understand.
Here with us now, Chief
Charlie
Mergers and
fan,
Acquisitions reporter for the New York Times, Andrew Ross Sorkin. Who? There he
wasn't even born in 1979.
Oh, come on, Joe.
Tell me about these.
Wait a minute. Look at this shot. It looks like his school picture.
It does look like a school picture. Stop it.
All right. Now let me establish him a little bit. He writes in today's paper, quote, bank profits appear out of thin air, and he goes on to write this. The latest big idea is the so-called stress test that is being applied to the banks. This is playing to a tough crowd that long ago decided to stop suspending disbelief. If the stress test is done honestly, it is impossible to believe that some banks won't fail. If no bank fails, then what's the value of the stress test? To tell us everything is fine? When people know it's not? It's such a good question.
It is a great question, and Andrew, it looks like yesterday the markets did not believe some of the reports from the banks.
I think that's the other issue here. So we have these stress tests coming up, which are either going to be very truthful and by the way, then very bad, or they're going to be completely dishonest and we won't believe them, and that'll be bad unto itself. But the larger issue is that all these bank earnings we keep hearing over the past week and a half just happen to be not so true. You start going through the numbers and you say to yourself, so look at this. JP Morgan, for example, reported great earnings. In part, how did they do that? They said, well, our bonds, the price of our bonds dropped. They went down, right? So you think that's bad. Well, they said, well, no, we're going to actually call that a profit because we could actually retire those bonds, buy them back at a lower price, and we'll call that a profit. So these aren't sustainable profits. These aren't real profits. There's a lot of shenanigans going on. You probably heard Goldman Sachs took an entire month of December where they lost $1.5 billion and just it disappeared like magic. So there's a lot of issues here, a lot of issues.
But the stress tests, David, wasn't the value of them to separate the good from the bad banks and help the ones that can be propped up in the middle?
Well, my understanding is that they'll still be able to achieve some of that. I think what Andrew was referring to, there's been a lot of criticism that the assumptions about what additional financial shock there would be have already happened. And so they are not as dire as they might be. But there's some disagreement about that. What I've heard is that these stress tests will reveal there are 2 or 3 banks that are in real trouble, and another grouping that are okay, and another grouping that are actually just fine. But I do think what's important, and maybe Andrew can comment on this. I've talked to bankers who say we're so focused on bank lending, which Treasury data indicate has gone down further, but this in part has to do with the level of demand for lending right now from actual banks, as opposed to what's happening in the securitization market, where you've got 3/4 of lending that goes on, and that's what truly remains frozen.
Right. No, David is absolutely right, and that is the big piece of this that we have yet to unclog, and it's unclear, by the way, whether post a stress test, post giving these people more money or whatever we're going to do is actually going to unclog that. It's in part a demand problem, and it's in part a problem in that the securitization market does not work. Investors are just not there. There's a lot of capital on the sideline, but nobody wants to put it to work, by the way, including the U.S. government, because the flip side of all the things we've just been talking about is when this stress test comes out, if, as David says, and you may be right, there's 2 or 3 banks that actually do fail the test and actually need additional capital, we're now talking, or at least the Treasury Department is now talking not about giving them new capital, but about taking the capital they have. It's another sleight of hand, and taking that capital from the debt side or the preferred share side and putting it into the common shares. I know it's complicated, but it's basically just a lot of swapping money for without actually new money coming in.
But it also means that the government, if they have common shares, can pick up the phone and say, you should do this.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what that means.
Pat, it sounds like things are not getting better as quickly as someone to have us believe in the banking sector.
Well, that's exactly right. That's my question. Basically, Andrew, is there still a possibility that, say, some of these big banks, you can mention Citi, BOA, could conceivably go under, or has the government basically made a decision that no matter what happens, they're not going under?
Well, no, and Bob, Pat, that's exactly right. The issue is that they've already said they're not going under, and so some people say, well, why would you move the preferred shares to the common shares and effectively nationalize these things? Well, guess what? We already did by saying these things are not going out of business. We're backstopping these things completely.
Okay, so city and...
so I don't sell.
Yes, keep home on the city.
As low as they go.
Double down and make some money.
I don't know about doubling down.
Yeah, exactly. David, who do you have on the show this weekend?
Well, one of our guests will be King Abdullah of Jordan.
Oh, that's great.
He's meeting with President Obama for the first time in the White House. And it's, he'll be speaking just to us, talking about Middle East peace, Iran, other topics. It's going to be an important time to speak to him.
Did you see that picture of you? That Chuck Todd needs some advice.
God, can you help Chuck
Put
Todd?
David's picture. That's a nice
Chuck has a lampshade. Horrible.
Well, no.
Horrible
Believe me, what was
picture.
under the lampshade was much worse.
Very creepy.
Yeah.
No.
Talk to him about his
You're not going to get me drawn into that.
I'm just saying,
my
you could
pal
give him some
Chuck.
advice. You take a very nice picture. You just look right in the camera directly. It's nice.
He may be your pal, Chuck, but you do not want to fly through certain airports in the world with a guy looking like that. Okay? The whole party's going to be taken into a back room and beaten up. Look at him.
David, admit it. Look right now at the monitor
at the
and tell me
that
that
is
very professional.
Chuck is a
very
handsome
good.
man.
He's a handsome man.
He could do better than this picture.
He's creepy in that child. Oh, there's a good-looking guy. All right.
David Gregory of Meet the Press. Andrew, will you stay with us? We still have to do the class picture.
All right, very good. And thank you for wearing the rep tie like all the other kids. When we come back, Hardball's Chris Matthews will be here.